On this episode of Locked On Lightning, we discuss more about last night's win against the Nashville Predators. We answer some fan mailbag, and we look towards tomorrow afternoon's game against Florida Panthers. All that and more, but first, let's play that music.
You're Locked On Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
On today's episode of Locked On Lightning, we're discussing more about last night's game. We open up some more mail, and we discuss tomorrow's matchup against the Florida Panthers. But first, I want to remind you that today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props odds than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. So picking up from last night, if you didn't catch our late night episode, we got it out a couple hours after the game, but we got it out nonetheless. An impressive win for the Tampa Bay Lightning, a 5-2 win at home against the Nashville Predators, a game in which I equated it to, I think that throughout the course of a season, any season, we kind of look for that one game that sticks with us. And I think that this will be in the conversation down the road. I mean, we have tons of hockey left to play. So, I mean, there could be a multitude of games that could occur from now until the end of the regular season, in which we could say that was a perfect win, a win in which was just tasted so sweet. I think really only anything that could top this, I think, in my opinion, is probably going to be a performance what we saw from last night from our skaters, and then you couple that with a Vasilevsky shutout, or even last night. I mean, last night I think that a couple of plays don't go the Predators' way, and we could be very well sitting here discussing Brian Elliot, who, I forgot to mention last time. I mean, Brian Elliot really has just from day one has really impressed me since he has signed with this team dating to last year. And, with the retirement of Curtis McElhinney going into last season, it really, I was a little bit worried because, the Lightning had that solid backup. The guy that where on certain nights, really, he looked like he could be a first goalie on certain teams. And in the 2 years that that Brian Elliott has been with the Lightning, 26 games played, 24 of those started. He's 17, 5, and 3 with a save percentage of .907, and a goals against average of, I don't know why Hockey Reference isn't showing it right away, but 2.70, which is, I think, is fantastic for a backup goaltender. And you're probably asking yourself, Adam, why are you making such a big deal about a backup? Because let's call it what it is. I'm not saying that Andrei Vasilevsky is having a terrible season. He's not. He's 10-8, 10-8-1, which is, equates to a .909 save percentage and a goals against average of 2.75, and that's great. But this, we haven't really seen Vazzy be that shutdown guy just yet. There are sparks and flashes of it, but really what I'm trying to say, it's not so much what Vasilevsky is not doing or how he's really performing up to, not to the standards that I think that we expect him to, but I think it really makes a world of difference when you could feel super comfortable sitting your main guy, and be able to rely on your backup and get somewhat of the same performance. I was talking with a listener the other night, last night, during the game, where I was saying that really that Elliot was making a ton of great saves, and we've seen it this season where he has really gone out there and stood on his head in certain situations and really kept his team in certain games and allowed them to get things going. And I really think in the long run, and even over the course of a season, even if down the line, we start to see Cooper really start to ramp things up for Vasilevsky, start seeing him play more and more often. I stated in the beginning of the season that I really thought Cooper was kind of going to take a step back from that because he played Vasilevsky so much last year, and we kind of saw that fatigue play a factor throughout certain points in the playoffs. But I think we're going to start to see him ramp him up in the next couple of months and then start to kind of slow back on the reins. And it, like I said, it really makes a world of difference when you could throw a guy out there who really isn't going to be playing a lot, who knows his role. The Lightning have been very fortunate because if you look around the NHL, you have a multitude of teams where the backup and the starter are kind of basically neck and neck for starts and are on the same level of performance and talent and could be a starting goaltender. And I feel like that's a little bit more complicated when you have that situation when you have two goaltenders as kind of an embarrassment of riches as it is. It still puts your team in a weird situation to where at least the coaching staff, I don't think obviously the skaters and forwards and defensemen really care. I mean, they just go out there and play. But what your goalies and your coaches really comes down to is that, you have two ones and they think they're both a one. And then that could have potentially, if one guy gets hotter than the other, that could lead to a weird situation, an awkward situation down the road. But the Lightning are in a very fortunate situation with Brian Elliott. The way he's playing, he's 37 years old. He's a vet. He knows that at this point in his career, he's not going to be a starter anywhere. But he's still turning in those very good performances where you could kind of go out there as a fan and even as a player on this team and kind of just look away and not have to worry about him getting into a hairy situation or it kind of unraveling in an instant, which we don't see very often with Elliott. Usually we have a couple of shaky saves here and there to begin certain games or, maybe certain situations throughout the course of certain games where he kind of just, I don't know, gives up a weird soft goal. But for the most part, I think really, even if that does happen for the most part, it really, he has that experience to settle himself down and get back into the swing of things. And I really think if the Lightning do get back to the Stanley Cup final or at least get to the top of this division, which obviously is the main goal right now, I think Brian Elliott, to a certain extent, because we will probably see more of him as the season winds down. I really think that he will play a part in that. You would have to look at Vasilevsky's performance down the road, and especially even in the playoffs, and kind of look towards Brian Elliott and kind of kind of thank him just because of him putting the Lightning in that situation where they weren't forced to overplay Andre Vasilevsky. So we'll talk about the Lightning's matchup. And like I said, really a lot of good saves that I saw from Elliott. And obviously the Lightning played well enough in front of him where it wasn't that strenuous of a game for him. I mean, he did have to make 34 saves, but still nonetheless an impressive game from your backup and an all-around game as well from this Lightning team as they continue to roll, as we start to see them really get into top form. For all my soccer fans out there, they get into their top form. We're starting to see them really become what we wanted them to be in the beginning of the season, but obviously, That's not how the cookie crumbles. But looking ahead, the Lightning will be facing their bitter division rivals, the Florida Panthers, on Saturday afternoon. We'll preview that game in just a bit. But first, I want to talk about today's sponsor, and that is betonline.net. Now, betonline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional amateur league out there, from football to basketball, soccer, and esports. They've got it all at betonline.net. They're the fastest and easiest way to get your sports betting fix. So head to the website today or use your mobile device. BetOnline, where the game starts. So once again, I want to thank everybody for making us your first listen of the day. And if you haven't already, please go ahead and like and subscribe to the podcast. If you haven't already, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter at @L_Lightning. Locked_Lightning on Instagram, and follow me on Twitter at DenkyDank, DENKYD8NK. Love hearing from all of you. And I heard from some of the I got a question. I got another question. We answered a question the other night from our boy Nate, and today we're gonna answer a question to end the show from our boy Cody via YouTube. So looking forward to that. And if you want to drop a mailbag question, go ahead, comment on this video on YouTube as well, or tweet to us, or tweet to me directly, whichever you feel comfortable with, and I will gladly answer it on the show. So looking at tomorrow afternoon's game against the Florida Panthers. Now, I was very critical in the offseason, and maybe there's a little bit of a bias in my criticism. So the Florida Panthers, after winning the President's Trophy last year, completely bombed in the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs, which we're not going to rehash that. I would rather save that story for when Armando Velez comes on. And if you're just new to the show, Armando is the host of Locked On Florida Panthers, very good friend of mine here at the network. And I would rather bust his chops there and see his face in real time as we discuss that. But the Lightning are facing a team in which I quite frankly don't think that they have improved since last season. After making one of the biggest splashes of the offseason and trading for Matthew Tkachuk, quite honestly, I don't think that bringing Tkachuk to the team, especially giving up a number of players who were part of your core group of players that basically largely contributed to the success you had last year. I don't think right then and there, and maybe I'm crazy, maybe that wasn't really the trade to have made. I really think that was more of a kind of oh crap, we just blew it in the playoffs, nonetheless, to our division rivals. And once again, we are the laughing stock. And so we have to make some sort of drastic measure. And I really think that's what the drastic measure was. I think that this trade, and don't get me wrong, Matthew Tkachuk will be a good player, as he's still very young in his NHL career, but at the same time, he's coming off his first 100-point season. You traded away Jonathan Huberdeau, who was a Hart Trophy finalist last year, who carried your team and was one of the best players in the NHL for pretty much the entire season. And I just think that to kind of take that workload and put it on Tkachuk, at least from the standpoint, a general hockey fan standpoint, I don't think that was fair towards him. And I think that you're seeing it kind of pay out in just a slight, just because this team is 13-10-4. Their goal differential is only +6. So it's not like they're going out there and scoring a bunch of goals. They only have 95 goals scored in the season. The Lightning do have 91, so they do have the Lightning beaten in that respect. But at the same time, I don't think that it's that big of a difference. I think and we've spoken about this when it came to Detroit, Nashville, some of these other teams that are kind of middle of the pack teams. I think that the Lightning, regardless of if you're looking at stats, uh, still win out in a lot of instances just based off the fact of who is wearing their jersey. Um, and the experience that those players have had, and to put things in perspective, Florida Panthers, their 95-94 point goals scored on the season puts them 8th in the NHL overall. So, but like I said, the Lightning not too far behind. That's not that big of a deficit. The Lightning are 11th in the NHL in goals scored. So really not that big of a deal. But when you're giving up almost just as much, like I said, their goal differential is +6. When you're giving just as much up, I mean, that's what leads you to having a 4-3-3 record over your last 10. So looking at Florida's last 10, um, they, like I said, 4-3-3. Just won against Detroit, lost against Winnipeg. Not surprising. Winnipeg's one of the better teams in the NHL right now. Calgary, that's a losing 6-2 to Calgary. Calgary's not exactly the big bad Flames that we saw last year. You know, obviously they're missing some pieces. Johnny Gaudreau's gone. And you trade away Matthew Tkachuk. You have Jonathan Huberdeau and Owen Tippett, and I believe Nola Kari is there too, unless I think he's somewhere else actually. But you have those group of guys. I just feel like that doesn't mesh well with your current group that you have there in Calgary. So losing 6-2 to those guys is a little strange. That just shows me. I mean, you're also on a West Coast trip. I could tell at this. They were in Canada it looked like for 3 games straight, and then you go to Seattle and then back up to Canada. So that was a little bit of a tough road trip, but and that was right after you played Connor McDavid in the Edmonton Oilers and losing 4-3 in overtime. So you dropped 3 in a row there. To quite frankly, 2 of those 3 are not really good teams. They lost to St. Louis, they lost to Calgary. All right, the Edmonton loss, I'll give you that. But then you look back even further and you lost 5-3 to the worst team in the NHL in the Columbus Blue Jackets. So that tells me that consistency, as evident as it been for this Lightning team, is way worse of a problem. And when you kind of dive deeper into the team stats, the power play percentage speaks for itself. 20.6% on the season. That ranks them 25th in the league. So that works right into the Lightning favor of that special teams. And then you have that 20% power play percentage versus the Lightning's 78 PK percentage. I would say that you look at everything in this game thus far. You look at the rosters, you look at the goalie situation, you even look at the special teams and the face-off percentage. You know, not to get too crazy, but I don't see a reason as to why the Lightning should lose this game other than just being outmuscled, outgunned on the boards, which we've seen these games against Florida where those games will get intense. The Lightning did win their last meetup against these guys back in October, 3-2 win for the Lightning in Sunrise. Now the Lightning get to bring it back home and beat these guys in front of their home crowd at Amalie. But yeah, like I said, I don't look at this team for Florida and I'm not shivering in my boots. I look at the goalie situation. I'm not worried at all. You have Spencer Knight, who was the big name for a while there for Florida a couple of years back. This year, he's 8-4-3 with a goals against average of 2.64 and a save percentage of 919 and 1 shutout. And then Sergei Bobrovsky, who you're paying a king's ransom to, and he has a record of 5-6-1, 3.51 goals against average with a save percentage of 884. From the outside looking in and not really watching any Florida Panthers games other than this one that the Lightning played in, I'm not impressed and I'm not worried about this team. I look at, you look at some of the players on the Panthers team, and yes, you have the Tkachuks, you have the Barkovs, who just recently came back from a little bit stint of an injury. He has 19 points on the season. Sean Bennett, who I think is going to be the pain in the butt in this game. He has 7 goals and 22 points on the season with a power play goal. But really, what it comes down to, and then obviously you have Kachuk, Sammy Reinhart, Carter Verhaeghe, little tier for the guys who still miss him. Oh man, Carter Verhaeghe, who left the Lightning, to pursue greener pastures because the Lightning weren't going to pay him. Listen, the step that he's taken in his game since leaving Tampa, I mean, you kind of have to sit there and wonder what if. But then again, where do you slate him in the current lineup? But really, yes. To sum it up, and I don't want to turn this into the trash the Florida Panthers party, but at the same time, if you're an opposing team, especially the Lightning, and you're going out there and you're playing your rivals, you can't help but kind of laugh a little bit after what happened in the playoffs last year, and then you kind of see what's going on this year with this team. Really, what it comes down to for the keys for this game is that the Tampa need to play within themselves. They need to go out there, and they will have Vasilevsky in net. So you do have, and I think even Brian Elliot out there wouldn't be an issue, regardless of who's in net on the other end. Got to go out there with the same energy we saw this Lightning team have in that first period against Nashville last night. And if you do that, I think everything will work out. I think that this team is playing so well right now to where you kind of if you're John Cooper, you're kind of, even though you are as a coach, you have to make the improvements and adjustments throughout the course of a game. But you look at a game, especially like this, where I look at it as another situation where Tampa and Florida will be close for the first couple of periods, and then you'll see that gap in the performance start to really show itself, and you'll see Tampa take over as what we saw in the third period against Nashville. Ideally, I would like to see the Lightning win by 3+ goals again, like they did last night, 5-2 win. But like I said, these games are always very intense, always very physical, and that gives me the impression that this might be a very close game up until the last maybe 10 or so minutes of the third period. So really, like I said, the keys to this is the Lightning need to stay within their game. They need to play their game. John Cooper could basically right now at this point in time kind of sit back and let his team go on autopilot with the way Braden Point's been playing. Corey Perry is starting to pick it up. Nikita Kucherov's been playing very well. Stamkos, you got everybody on this team, especially those first 3 lines, playing incredible hockey right now, skating around with such confidence. And I think that really makes them more dangerous and will definitely play a huge factor as long as they don't take a bunch of penalties tonight. I think the Lightning will somewhat cruise into victory tonight against their divisional foes. So wrapping things up on the show, like I said, today we are once again answering some fan listener mailbag questions. I love that we're starting to get in a little bit of a groove, 2 shows in a row with this. So once again, if you want to send in some questions or have a question or an observation that wants to be addressed on the show, go ahead and comment on this video below or tweet to us, tweet to me, Danky Dank, DENKYDANK, or tweet to the show, LO_Lightning on Twitter, or DM me or DM the show. I'll eventually see it regardless. So go ahead and do that. So today's question comes from Cody C via YouTube. Cody says, what do you think about the defensive lines for the game? They had Hedman with Perbix and Sergachev on the third line. That was weird and crazy to me, but I thought Hedman, Chernak, then Sergei, Perbix, then the veterans on the third, Bogo and Cole. I think I like those pairs. Like amazing in games. They had, I think there was a little typo there for you, Cody, but amazing in games. They had the lineup. I like those. I like them. I like Perbix and Hedman. I spoke about it last night. I think that John Cooper has recognized how well Perbix has played up to this point in the season. I mean, I was talking to a listener last night saying that really Nick Perbix has really put himself in a phenomenal situation, and it really all goes back to his maturity. I think Nick Perbix has developed a lot faster than I think maybe the Lightning coaching staff would have predicted. And that all goes back to his days playing college hockey. And when you have a guy like that who comes out of college, 24 years old, has that maturity, has that wherewithal, doesn't panic in big spots. And we've seen him make quite a few very good plays in his own end that could potentially have led to game tying or go ahead goals. I mean, that really speaks volumes, especially when you pair that up with kind of the, I guess, slow start, if you want to call it, to what Victor Hedman's had thus far this year. Um, and then you pair that up with what Mikhail Sergachev has done early on this year offensively. I think you really have that nice mix. I think you have a nice mix with these first two lines because with Hedman and Perbix, and I spoke about it on a couple episodes ago, how I wish we could start. I wish we would see a little bit more of aggressiveness from Hedman because I feel like right now, the somewhat, I wouldn't call it hesitation, but just we're not seeing that stereotypical Hedman where he's just flying all over the place on both sides of the ice. I think really what it comes down to is that if he could get the offensive game going, the defense will come. That's all instinctual. But I think the offensive play, if he could get a little bit more aggressive, I think his confidence levels will go through the roof. And then while you kind of place more of an emphasis on Hedman in his offensive game, I think it's a perfect situation for Nick Perbix to kind of sit there and still, play his game exactly the way that he likes to play. So I think that's a great mix. And then on that second line with Sergachev and Chernak, we all know, is pretty much a shutdown defenseman at this point, has done a very good job kind of sliding into that defenseman leadership role that Ryan McDonagh held for so many years here in Tampa. I think it's a perfect mix where you have the same situation there on that second line where it allows Mikhail Sergachev to continue being aggressive, continue to focus on the offensive side of things while also playing defense. But we all know Mikhail Sergachev isn't exactly a shutdown defenseman. He's not Victor Hedman level. He's not. I think Eric Chernak's a better defender than he is. So you allow kind of Sergey to do his thing in the offensive side of things, and if he turns the puck over, which at times he is susceptible to do at the blue line, you have Eric Chernak there to help you bail you out. And going back to that first line real quick, I think the great thing about having Perbix and Hedman together on the first line is that not only are you allowing them to focus on different aspects of the game, of their games while they're working together on that line, but you have Nick Perbix, who, like we said, huge surprise to start off the season, learning from Victor Hedman, who last 10, 15 years, defenseman, one of the better defenders that we have seen in the NHL. So a great situation, I think, for the Lightning, where you have your vet and you have a guy who has enough maturity to do his job, and you don't have to worry about him out there, but at the same time be able to play with one of the best defensemen in the league. So a very good situation. And then that third line pairing, like you said, it was Bogo and Cole. I don't mind that, and I think we'll see Coop kind of slide Foot into that mix too as well. Foot missed a couple of games, and hopefully we could get him rolling again because I really would like to see Cal Foot play more often. I think that third line pairing is his spot, whether it be with Cole or at certain times with Bogosian. I think if Bogosian's in the lineup, I think Foot's not playing, unfortunately, but Cal Foot's going to have to put himself in a situation to where he's going to have to force John Cooper's hand and not have to sit him out on certain nights. So I think the Lightning defensive core right now is as good as it could get. I think that given the absences or the exits of Jan Ruda and Ryan McDonagh, I think this was really an amazing turnaround of events in terms of the best possible result that the Lightning could have gotten throughout the course of the season thus far. So, like I said, hopefully we could see Cal Foot get more playing time, improve as the season goes along. Can't wait to see how much improvement Nick Perbix makes over the course of the season, playing alongside Victor Hedman. I think we will have our moments where he will make some mistakes. He will have a downtick in his performance, but that just comes with being a rookie. So I'm not too worried about that. But like I said, overall, I think this Lightning team is playing well. I think that right now, um, going into the end of 2022, I think this is really kind of the point in the season where what you see is what you get, barring some catastrophic injuries or bringing in a player, a new player. I think that the Lightning are in a pretty good situation, and especially with their division rivals coming into Tampa on Saturday afternoon. So we'll be back Monday to recap that game. Stay tuned for that. And yeah, hopefully the Lightning. I think the Lightning will come out, I would say 4-2 in this game on Saturday afternoon. I think we're going to see more of the same from the Predators game. So yeah, like I said, we'll be back Monday to recap that. But in the meantime, that's been it for this episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Danker. I'll talk to you in the next one.